Some conversations will be mind-blowing and you'll sit there and you'll have the most profound change.
I can hear you really clearly.
Okay.
Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you great now. I couldn't hear you that well before with the other one I had on, but this one will work better. I'm gonna have to. I know I have to sit down once we talk, because I've had calls before, and I know you can hear this when it scrapes up against my beard.
Yeah.
So I'll have to sit down. So
that's okay. We can do a quick catch up before you sit down.
Okay.
And as I turn into a melting pot already.
It's hot.
Have you got air conditioning where you are?
Yeah, there is. I don't have it on in my office right now, but they do have it here.
Oh, but it's cool in your office.
Yeah, it's not bad. No.
I don't know why it's really hot in here today, but it's probably also because I put a bunch of Stop the Beasties Biting Me spray on, and I think, and for whatever reason, even though it's a natural one, I swear it just makes me perspire. But who knows? So life has been a bit interesting the last year. We'll go into that. I mean, we could just start now, you know, because the way that I've been doing it is very kind of freestyle and organic, and I like that, because then you don't have to do, hey, this is the great introduction. So So what is it that you're actually doing there? Just tell us what you're doing there.
So I'm doing what they call arming the berimbau. It's an instrument that we use in the practice of capoeira. It looks like a bow and arrow. And so I had to make the wire, what we call arame, tighter, so that it would work. So that if I play something.
You mean when you play something?
When I play something, it will sound good for us. I'm going to switch positions here now that I've gotten that taken care of.
Yeah. So basically, the way that I'm doing these conversations is very Janice style, in terms of it's pretty organic, and we have a few ideas of what we might talk about, and then we just go for it, because I think people just enjoy a conversation, not necessarily needing all the pomp and ceremony of, hey, this is Janice, it's 52 conversations, because we have that anyway, because I have a little thing that does that for me. So I'm like, I don't need to do it. Let's just be real. And I think that's what people value, actually, is people being real.
I agree. Thank you for being flexible as I put all this stuff together.
Well, I think it's really cool, because we get to see so tell people what you just grabbed.
So this is a cabasa. At least that's what we call it in capoeira. I think on the island, what do they call this on the island? Some kind of gourd. I'm not sure. There's another name. Calabash, right?
Calabash, right?
Yeah.
I would say it's calabash.
Yeah.
So did you get that here, or you had that already?
No. This is actually from Brazil.
Okay. So we're gonna start where we found ourselves, actually, with you putting that together. So if people haven't heard of capoeira, if I'm saying it correctly, hopefully, what is it, and where does it come from?
So it's a martial art, but it is also more than that, because it combines dance with acrobatics, with music, with philosophy. There's rituals around the practice of capoeira. And so it's a great way for you to stay in shape. It's a tool also that has really deep roots in the enslavement of Africans in Brazil. And it's something that I do. It's something that I love. It is a big part of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can vouch for that. We were very lucky, and we had some classes up at the shed at Sugar Ridge for a while, and I did several. And yes, it's very demanding. Well, maybe I'm just too old for that. I don't know.
No, you're definitely not too old.
That's not true. I know that's not true, because I can keep going. I guess it's something that's very different, and certainly my experience of it, the layers that it has that goes way beyond fitness.
Yes,
were incredible, and I guess that's the thing that is the biggest shift. So how did you come to capoeira? Have you always been doing it, or is it something that you found, or it found you?
I like to say it found me. I started in 2006. I was on this search around Chicago. I lived in Chicago at the time. I'm from Chicago. and I was on this search for a martial art class. And I heard about this thing that folks said was, I couldn't pronounce it. I was like, Capoeira, what is that? But I knew that it was a martial art that combined what looked like breakdancing, excuse me, what looked like breakdancing, and had a very really rich and unique history. And so I went down to different dojos around the community looking for this martial art, but I couldn't find it. And then a friend handed me a flyer and said, hey, they're having a class for this martial art. It's at 95th Street in Abbott Park on the south side of Chicago. And so I went in and I saw the class and I saw what looked like break dancing and martial art combined. I said, what is this? And I've got to know more about it. And I started practicing, and short story, I mean, 15 years later, now here I am. Continuing to train. I've been to Brazil several times. I've trained throughout the United States. So it's a deep part of who I am.
So is there a big community built around capoeira? A brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever we want to call it?
For sure. Yeah. There's definitely a community within the States, within Brazil. Obviously, there's a lot of schools, and throughout Europe and all over the world, you're finding different schools that are being born as a response to the development of capoeira and its expansion. It's nowhere near as popular as karate or some of the traditional martial arts, so to speak, but it is growing in popularity, and there is a community of folks who practice capoeira. We call ourselves capoeiristas.
Okay. I
Yeah.
can't even begin to try and say that. Tell me a little bit, because I mean, I know that when we did the classes at Sugar Ridge, you gave us some of the history. Is there a kind of a version of the history? Because you've already mentioned that it came from the enslavement of people in Brazil. So
Right.
how did it come about that this got created from that?
There's multiple perspectives around it. Some say that it was a tool to retain cultural affinity, to retain an identity to what the slave trade tried to take from the African people. And it evolved from what was a dance, what was a ritual. Folks say the dance of the zebra is one of the precursors to capoeira, which was a dance that people would do of African descent in terms of moving into different stages of puberty. It was a way of showing their prowess, their ability to be able to take on a mate or a partner. And so this dance that looks like a fight slowly evolved into what we understand today as capoeira in Brazil, out of that process of trying to retain cultural identity, but also create something new in response to resistance that was essential to the people that were enslaved.
So when I'm not going to try and say it, what you are if you're a capoeira person.
Uh-huh.
So whenever there is a practice, there is always this kind of ritualized part of the practice, yeah?
Well, some schools do it differently. Not every school will start the same way in terms of how they approach teaching students different aspects of the history. Some debate the history and they say that that's not really what it is. It is something entirely different. And while we like to romanticize it as a form of self-defense, we can't really say that that's what it was. We can say that it was a dance, and yes, it has the martial art elements to it, but some are less prone to stick to the rituals, to stick to the history as a part of their practice, and they're more so about the movements and really building community around it. No judgment.
No, absolutely.
It's different. Yeah.
So for you're connected to the ritual side of it and the connection?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely do find that that's a really important part of it. At least it motivates me to continue to train and to develop, knowing that I'm a part of something that came out of my ancestors, knowing that there's this really unique history around resistance is one of the things that drives me to continue to want to develop, to want to pass it down to my children, to want to spread community, to want to use it in pretty much every aspect of my life.
Yeah, well, I mean, for people that don't know you, maybe you can give us a quick hair version of who you are, what you do, and family everything that I've seen and know about you is family is key to absolutely everything. And you bringing their involvement to everything that you do collectively seems to be paramount to the way that you do family, which for me gets a massive yes. There's a heart on there. It's like, yes, yes. So maybe you could give us a version of kind of who you are, how you got to Antigua, I guess. And I suppose how you define yourself in different ways. Lots of questions in there. So lots of questions to talk about.
Yes. My name is Vernon Lindsay. I am from Chicago, Illinois. There's a lot that I could say about my background, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I grew up in a home. My father is and has always been a pastor. I have 5 sisters. In 2013, I finished a PhD at the University of Illinois at Chicago. In 2016, my wife and I and our 3 children decided to leave Chicago, move to Mazatlan, Mexico, where her father was living at the time. Her mother was living there before we decided to move there. She passed away, and which was a big part of the push as to why we decided to make that move. And then 2018, I came to Antigua to work at the American University of Antigua in the College of Medicine. And throughout this process, I mean, at least for the last 16 years, capoeira has been a key element of that process in terms of keeping me motivated to stay in shape and to build community with people.
Cool.
That's a quick version.
That's the quick version. So yes. I want to backtrack to what was your PhD in, and what do you teach?
My PhD is in policy studies and urban education. But here at the university, I teach learning strategies to students who are enrolled in medical school. Okay. So it's a little bit of a different twist on my work, but I still do find it very much so relevant. The school has a really unique mission around wanting to connect with students, wanting to give students from underserved communities an opportunity to join the medical field. And in my research that looks at structural inequalities, I see that as being an aspect of that work. I see it as being connected. And the books that I've written to date reflect that passion, that research that looks to understand inequalities and also looks to create solutions.
That sounds really interesting. And I know it's interesting for people that don't know all about you. Your first book was based on or is written around?
So my first book was written around my story. In terms of my experiences growing up as a young Black male in Chicago, going to school and reflecting on different mentoring experiences that I had throughout that process that shaped me into who I am today, and also lots of the challenges that I also endured. But the stories that I shared in that first book were results of the stories that I shared with other young Black males in Chicago in their transition from adolescence to adulthood.
Is it, I don't know why, the word like navigation system came into my mind then, as if you're, through your story, potentially helping people to navigate their way through adolescence and growing into manhood in that environment.
Absolutely. That's the goal, really, is to share an example of what it took for me to get to where I am now. And I'm still growing. I'm still developing into the best version of myself. And I realize that, but I'm using it as a framework to help shape and mold different perceptions around what it means to live and thrive in this world. And so, yes, my story is very central to my work, and it is a way for me to connect and create bonds around our experiences.
So how do you currently connect to community here? I mean, Antigua, then there must have been some differences coming into this community and how you were potentially seen and received. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really different right now in terms of really building a community in the COVID situation. I mean, we can't really connect in person in the way that we have been able to in the past. I mean, I have some students who I do remain in contact with because they started taking capoeira with me. They're here on the island, they're locals. And so we remain in contact and we continue to connect and talk. But yeah, the perception of me and coming to the island has been really unique. People
tell us a few stories. I mean, I read most of your posts, and I love the fact that you're, I guess in a way, I was attracted to you in the way you present, because it's very like me in a way. You're very direct and very real. It's not sugar coated, because it doesn't need to be, because this is truth and this is reality. So, you know, I've heard you or read some of your things where some of the local people will comment on your locks as an example and make assumptions based on that.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely do believe that I'm a Rastafarian, and I definitely hear that as I go throughout the community. Rastaman, or, you know, people address me as Rasta or what have you. And I have nothing by all means against Rastafarianism. I respect a lot of the roots and a lot of what they represent in terms of their Pan-African beliefs. I think those things are solid, but I don't practice it as a religious faith. It's not something that I bond with in that capacity. So it's been interesting to see. When I remember one incident, we were out and we had this conversation with a lady, and my wife said something like, you know, you're a professor. Told the lady that I'm a professor at the university, and her just demeanor just completely changed based on what she had assumed I represented in my life. And it's just like, you do what? You're who? You know? So it doesn't help that my boys have locks also.
Yes. So
there's that. And then here's the other thing though, but it's not. I think that some people will see, okay, if you have dreadlocks, then either you're Rastafarian or you're fashion dread, or I think I've heard fashion Rasta or something of that nature. It was much more than, when I decided to get dreadlocks, it wasn't about trying to be cool. It wasn't about trying to make a fashion statement. It was really about connecting to those roots and embracing my hair and really seeing that as a symbol to reflect pride as being a person of African descent. It wasn't just because it was a fad or trend.
It's interesting because I remember I've done a bit of that conversation with you about your hair, and the fact that you've said it exactly as you've said it is just a kind of statement. There's all these people, I'm going like this at the general waving out in Antigua with their fake hair, right? Impersonating locks. And I'm kind of like, wow, you're so lucky you could just do that for real. Why don't you just do that for real? And obviously as a white person looking at that, I mean, I very much of the mind, oh my God, I'd love to have a great big fro and just be done with it. You know what I mean? And not have to worry about anything else. But I guess that's the differences of reflection from different places, isn't it? But the fact that you said for you, it was kind of a journey into connecting to your roots. So ancestry, heritage, being rooted in your past, yet bringing it forward into the present seems really, really important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I started seeing men wearing dreadlocks when I went around to different poetry sets in Chicago, and I saw that, and then I listened to their poetry, and it was, okay, there's meaning behind the way they dress, the way they carry themselves, the way that they communicate. And that meaning drew me in, and I felt like I had to connect to that. And then going through African American Studies was my major in undergrad at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So all of those experiences shaped me into who I am and the way that I present myself to this world.
And then you shared that down to your children.
Yes, and then I gave it to my boys. I tried to get my wife to allow my daughter to have dreads, but she said absolutely not.
She drew a line.
She drew a line, yeah, because she feels that she's a girl. She'll want to have flexibility to change her hair, and she just didn't want to impose it on her. Although my wife used to have dreadlocks also before.
I was just about to say that because you know I'm going to have a conversation with Gabby anyway, and I've been watching her story of her hair and what she's doing. They're going for, I'm getting rid of it all, so I'm growing it back, and what am I going to do with it now? And it's interesting. And I guess that comes from the feminine side of her, though, wanting to be able to do something else with her hair, right?
Yeah, wanting to have the freedom and the flexibility to do whatever she wants.
Remind me how old your daughter is now.
My daughter is now 10.
It's 10.
She'll
So
be
if
11
she
years old.
turned round and she said to you and Mum, okay, I want to get locks on, would that be okay equally? Because it would be
for
her
me,
choice.
yeah. I don't know. For me, yeah.
Like, yes.
Yeah, cool, great. I don't know about Gabriella. She might be okay. I think she'll be okay with it. She'll be okay. If she really, if Vizuri said that I really want to do this, then yeah.
She would be allowed. So in terms of the way you practice capoeira with the children, are they still doing it? Are they still coming out training with you all the time?
They still do it.
One of the absolute joys up at the shed is actually seeing you as a family getting involved. I know Gabby doesn't, because she just doesn't. No. And that's another conversation for her to have with her. Yeah, the children, has it actively been, we want to do this with you, because they see what it brings to you?
Yeah, they see me out there in the port that we have in the morning training, and they oftentimes join me. And in fact, I've had one of their rules now since we've been doing this homeschooling, that they cannot get on Roblox until they show me that they've done 100 kicks and 100 escapes as a part of their morning chores before they turn on that computer. Anything it takes in order to encourage them to develop in capoeira, but also to just break up that time in front of the screen.
Yeah, and creating discipline and resilience in different ways.
Yes.
I mean, it's taken us onto a subject. How do you feel about all of this screen time that everybody is now? I mean, it's been interesting for me because I've been working like this for maybe 10 years. I've been connecting to clients in different parts of the world. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, so you guys have just caught up, but it took a pandemic for you to find this way. But obviously, as a parent of a grown-up daughter, I think I would find the last year incredibly difficult, because I was the parent that when those little Game Boy things were coming out and all my daughter's friends had them, I was like, you're not having one of those. You're not getting one of those. And I think she had to be like 12 or 13 before she was allowed anything electronic. And I was really strict on that. I mean, I'm obviously older than you. I'm 54. And I can remember when we lived in Germany, and all of a sudden you could go to a restaurant where it's much more social in Europe anyway, with taking children out at different times and being a bit later, and being handed these damn Game Boy things because I had a child with me. And I was like, no, she does not need that. Why would you be doing that? Do you know what I mean? And today, I mean, for me, I find it really difficult in the UK and here, but definitely more in the UK before COVID, going out and about and seeing children in pushchairs that are maybe, I don't know, 18 months or 2 years, and they know their way around a tablet or a phone. My brain is just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So how do you feel about the fact that education has been forced to go online for our children, for our adults, for some of your, how do you feel about it?
I have mixed emotions, because I know that clearly technology is going to be an important part of our future. It's an important part of our current reality. But I'm also very much so aware of addiction, and I don't want my children spending all of their time in front of the screen. So I intentionally make them get up, go outside. All right, the computer's going off, no more screen time for the rest of the day. I need you to go outside and play. We just got a puppy, so that gives me another thing for them to get out.
Puppy.
But I know that it has a purpose. I know that I cannot take them from that tool. They need to have that in order to survive, in order to make a living in the future. But I'm also pretty old school in that I want them to spend as much time outside as possible. I want them to be creative. And I think that sitting down and just playing games all day robs them from that kind of internal ability to get outside and just enjoy life for what it is, and experience boredom. Boredom is a good thing for our brains. We need to have some downtime.
Because if we get boredom, that can lead us. So a lot of the time when I'm working with clients, I'm like, get childlike, get curious. Remember that feeling that you used to have, because it's that teaches us, and we learn from it. So it's almost like, I feel sometimes that this whole technology, which is amazing, and I make no bones about that, because if I couldn't be on FaceTime in the last 7 years, every time I've wanted to, with my parents and daughter, I would not be here, because I've been there before in my previous life as an army wife, when my ex-husband used to disappear, and we used to depend on these things called blueies, which were these military kind of letters. And if you were lucky, you got one after 6 weeks, or maybe you didn't hear from them even for like 4 or 5 months. So I've lived on the other side of that. Yet equally, it's almost like we're over-connected, and then we can't, when you say, all right, I'm putting WhatsApp off for a while, I'm turning notifications off, it's like we need it because it gives us so much. But literally, exactly as you're presenting, the intentionality behind saying, this is done now, that's going away, you're not touching it because you need to do that, to me is a huge must.
Yeah. And we have a rule that technology has to go off at 7 o'clock. They cannot be on the computer after 7 o'clock, and then they can't touch it again until 6 or 7 the next morning. It's definitely something that is a challenge for us as parents, and yet our children need it in order to communicate. I mean, yes, we have so many benefits that come from technology, from social media, from those resources, but it's very important that we also unplug from time to time.
Yeah,
and just be present in the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that you're avidly into listening to different things and exploring, and a lot of the podcasts that I've been listening to over the last year have really differing opinions, about children around technology, whether it's nurturing them in some way. And it's, in the UK, there's been research that people that had issues at school around bullying, down to appearance and things like that, that social stigma has been taken away. So that hasn't been happening. Then there's people who are just so now locked into this virtual world that actually, even here, I've had people reach out to me when school went back temporarily about, my child doesn't want to leave me, because they've actually got used to being with me, and they've got used to doing it in this virtual world, and they don't want to go to the physical school. I mean, 100%, there is a whole bunch of mental health issues in different ways, different levels and different demographics that's coming out of this. I mean, what do you think about that? Have you had any of these stories and experiences come to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a concern about the loss in the ability to socialize with other people in person, and getting used to just, texting or being on the screen all the time. You lose a big part of your communication skills that is very important and necessary in order for you to survive. And that's been a concern that Gabriella and I have had, especially with our children. In fact, the other day, my middle son, they've had like a spring break, and it was their first day back into the class. And about halfway through the first class, he started crying, and the teacher took him out and put him into a private room, and said, what's going on? What's the problem? And he couldn't really communicate, but eventually he said, I just really miss my friends and being in person, and I'm tired of doing this online schooling. So it's definitely hard. I mean, you have the benefit where you can communicate through Skype and different video resources, but nothing replaces that ability to be able to connect with a person in person,
isn't it? One of my nieces back in the UK, she's a teaching assistant at a primary school where her daughters go, and she's actually worked through the whole of the pandemic, because basically the school was open so that children of key workers, but also children in need, that basically it was felt they are better served by coming into school, were there. And then because her husband is a physiotherapist who works in the local hospital and was working crazy hours working with COVID patients and other patients, she found herself in this position where she was having to make a choice to take her girls into school, but her girls who love going to school, who were then sort of 6 and 9, 10, they actually weren't feeling any joy in going to school, because the way that they were being schooled, because of the setup, because of COVID, they weren't in their normal groups. They weren't allowed to socialize with their friends. And she actually found herself in this real dilemma where at one point she was thinking, well, maybe I just need to say I can't work, because her children were getting to go to school, but it wasn't regular school either. So it's been really interesting how people have had these different experiences. And eventually her girls did kind of settle into this routine. But her youngest, who's very ballsy and very straight up, she was like, I don't want to go because it's horrible, because I'm with these 12 people. I don't even know these 12 people. And poor Christina felt herself in this real moral dilemma. And as I've listened to different people's stories, I've just been, gosh, I'm glad I'm old and my daughter's 27 almost. Do you know what I mean? Because I didn't have to do this. Because I mean, it's a discussion I've had with my niece before. She had considered at one point homeschooling, which is another thing that now people are saying, oh my God, I'd never homeschool, right?
Right. It's hard.
Absolutely. I think it's hard. I mean, when I was back in the UK before I moved out here, I actually worked with some homeschoolers who'd elected to make that choice. And I was contacted by the different groups in Herefordshire where I'm from. And, you know, a lot of those children, it was a parental decision because their children were suffering for whatever reasons within the school system. And then some of the parents just actually wanted to say, I don't necessarily agree with the education system, so I'm going to homeschool. And it's been interesting in terms of looking at them and how they've dealt with that. And they've been thriving in a way, because they've been saying, yeah, this is what we've been telling you all along. Do you know what I mean? So what had been your thoughts on homeschooling, and do you have any different thoughts now?
Well, when we first moved abroad in 2016 and moved to Mexico, we initially were going to homeschool our children. Then we quickly realized that in order to homeschool our children, that would mean that one, they would miss out on the social opportunities to really get immersed in Spanish. And we're so grateful that we didn't allow that to happen, because they wouldn't be able to speak Spanish today.
Yeah.
But we realized also that it requires a lot of time, energy, and focus. And my wife and I both have these entrepreneurial passions, and trying to do that work from home in addition to teach is insane. It's just really, really difficult. And now with the pandemic and they're at home and they are doing a lot of their classes online, we realize just how difficult it is to do that. I come into the office like I am today, a couple of days out of the week, but the other days I'm at home. And I try to help out as best as I can between the hours that they have their live classes and they have their homework. But when my wife is there, she's alone and trying to help 3 children in 3 different grades and get online and do these assignments. It's really difficult to really get the time that you need to focus on your work and to build a business. It's hard.
I mean, how do you manage? How does one manage having 3 children, 3 different grades? Are they having classes at the same time, or are they all?
Some days they do have classes at the same time.
It's
hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Everybody has to have their earphones on, and thankfully we have the resources so that we can support them. But it's just really difficult, especially my youngest. He doesn't like it at all, and so you really have to watch him, because he'll just leave the call and start watching something on YouTube. So it's always
that would have been me. I'd have been going, no, I'm not for this. I'm going to go and look at something. I'm one that was staring out the window, daydreaming how life could not be 9 to 5 or something like that. Oh gosh, it's really interesting in terms of all of that management going into that, though. So, do you think that dare I predict, when the pandemic finally changes somehow and people return to school, return to work, do you think that there will have been a massive shift in the way that curriculums are delivered, workplace. I mean, I've had this conversation with business people before, and they said, you know, we've realized we don't necessarily need to have these huge offices with 200 people in, because actually 100 of those people can just be home working. And it's still viable. Do you think that we're going to see a societal shift in curriculums and the way education is delivered, and business is operating in different ways?
Absolutely. I see that we're having evidence of that in this example that you said, where we realize we don't need 200 employees here at the same time. We only need 100, and some of you can work from home. And we've seen that also with our children's school. When they went back in September, while the in-class, those sessions continued to happen, they also had online work that they didn't have before. They had to still go into Google Classroom and submit worksheets, and they had these meetings from time to time. And I believe that's still going to be a part of us now that we move forward, to realize that, okay, yes, while we do have certain hours for school, we don't have to feel restricted around those times, and we can have these virtual meetings that can help foster learning more and can provide some additional instruction. And I think that can be a good thing for students who need it. It definitely can be a good opportunity for them to get stretched in those
some ways. It's helping create behavioral flexibility, which actually is key, right, for learning in different ways.
It is. It is, right.
I'm very much so. My daughter is actually having her first baby in May, which is super exciting.
Oh,
and
wow.
one of the things that happened coming out of sort of last year was personally a bit of a drama for me. So I left here originally March the 15th last year. My father passed on March the 25th, straight into this crazy lockdown and all the things that brought. And one of the things that it gifted in a way was my daughter's decision to bring the making a baby forward by a year. So, you know, super exciting. And then there was this house move that was on the agenda, and they lived in a town. And I'd had an experience where I'd gone with the niece that I talked about maybe 2 years ago. I'd gone with my daughter's husband, whose nieces were at that school. And it was a huge city school. Hereford is a small city, but to me, this school was huge. Okay. And there was hundreds of parents everywhere, all like gathered outside, like clucking away like chickens, all of this noise. And I actually had my first experience of really feeling physically uncomfortable that I can remember in my life, where I was just like, oh, this is horrid. This is really not nice. And then sort of saying, well, what's it about? And this is a primary school that has like 1,300 children in it.
Wow. Okay.
And I was like, wow, that's a big school. And I know from my niece that it's a big school. And I remember walking back with my daughter's husband, Jamie, and then speaking to my niece and saying, I need Nicola and Jamie to move to the countryside so that their children can go to a small school. And I realized that it was a reflection. So I went eventually, when I moved back from wherever we were in the UK when I was 5, to where my father had come from. And I went to a small school, literally the village school. And there was probably 80 or 90 kids there. So really small and rural.
Okay.
And then I went to secondary school, which I remember being a real shock, because all of a sudden, I mean, and probably then there was 1,200, which probably isn't that big in terms of a big secondary school now.
Right.
But I recognised then my daughter was born, and she was born in Germany. And before she was 7, she'd already had 4 schools because we moved. And one of my reasons for wanting to settle was so that she went to a small school, and that she took friends from that small school into a secondary system. So she ended up going to the new version of the school that I'd originally gone to, which my dad had originally gone to. So, but it was the newly built version. It was still this small rural school. So maybe they had 140 children, if that. And it became really important to me that Nicola and Jamie moved to the countryside. So very luckily, they've managed to get a property that's in the small village that's the next to my home village. And the school is right outside the door, literally. And it's a local school. Yeah, it was really interesting for me reflecting how passionate I felt literally about, I do not want their smallie to go to a school that's so big where they just get lost in it, literally, because I know that so many people can get lost in the system and in that so many numbers. What's your thoughts around the big numbers that you can find within education?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits in being here on the island of Antigua is that you do have smaller classrooms, at least where they are in school. They have a very small school. I'm not sure the exact number of students that are there, but I believe the most that they may have in one classroom is 20. That may be the most, but it's a very small school, and we appreciate the smallness that is here and is available. When we lived in Chicago, I couldn't imagine putting them in one of those schools and hoping that they would get through and make it into secondary and eventually the university. That's what they decided to do. So I definitely am a proponent of smaller classroom environments because you get those opportunities to create that intimacy that you don't often get in the big city. And especially if you have any kind of learning challenge, you need to have that additional attention and time with the material. So I'm definitely a proponent for smaller classroom environments.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting thing that you brought up there, you know, what are we going to call it? People that need extra support, behavioral challenges, whatever the label is that is currently in use. If you have such big numbers, it's so hard to identify. And then even if you identify it, I mean, this is something that I touched in the UK before I left and ongoing, is people reaching out to me. And the case that I always have in my mind is a college teacher contacting me and saying, you know, I've got my son, he's on the spectrum, he's Asperger's. And he's already been told by his secondary school that he won't be able to go to Switzerland on the school skiing trip that's happening in 9 months. So as soon as I heard that, my brain was like, excuse the language, what the fuck? Because to me, all that said to me was they are already saying that they are failing him because they can't see that they can do something for him in 9 months to enable him to go.
Exactly.
And I was so bloody cross.
No. I get that. Yeah, and that does happen, especially in those larger schools where they simply don't have the resources, or they're just too many students to really give them that attention that they need in order to bring them up to par with their classmates.
Yeah, I mean, so I had a really interesting experience because then I met her son, and once we got over the fact, I think the first session he told me he was going to kill me, and I was like, "Oh, you're going to shoot me?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Oh, okay. Do you know when it is that you're going to shoot me? Because like my daughter's only 14 and I'll cook some meals and I'll make sure they're in the freezer." And I just had this really rant, and his mum sort of sat there looking at me as if I was nuts. And the thing that I didn't want to do was go, "Oh my God, and why is it that you want to shoot me?" Because I realized that was, you know, that's just not going to work with this young man as he was then. And he was like 14 and he was huge. He was like the size of the door already. And I was like, oh gosh, I had some really interesting sessions with him. But ultimately I went into the school and met with their counsellor and then met with their head of year. And basically I was very Janice, like I said, I can't believe that you're willing to admit that you're going to fail this child for the next 9 months. I said, that's really appalling. Clearly you need some help with that. What can we do? And he went on the trip and he had a great time. And the thing that worked for him was this, ironically, or not ironically, thought field therapy, which is a tapping thing, worked beautifully for him because he didn't have to express himself, yet he was getting rid of his emotional trauma, and then we worked through different things. I just saw that he's turned, I think he's now 24, and he's the manager of a phone shop in our little city, and his mum's super proud of him, and he's now like 6'5" of the giant.
Wow.
Yet they were willing to just fail him just like that. Yet all he actually needed was someone to be able to look at him in a different way. And with all the knowledge and all the learning that you have, how much of that do you see where you see people that you know they're just being failed by a system, and the only thing that's really wanting is a human being that can meet that human being where they need to be met?
Yes, that's the importance of a caring teacher is critical to a student's development. And if you do not have people who are in position and who are willing to take on those responsibilities, then oftentimes they do get lost into the system. And that's a big part of why I came into education, was because I saw that there are many schools that are, well, some may say they're intentionally failing our students, because someone has to work those positions that no one else wants to work. And so they're setting them up for failure in a way to help the system in itself succeed. It's really important that we have caring individuals that are in the schools, that are willing to take on students who have special needs, that need those resources, because having a mentor, having someone who is there that's willing to be patient with them, to explain the content a little bit differently, to have that concern about their well-being is really critical, and it can really make a difference in a student's life and their outcomes and where they end up.
Yeah, and not to be written off just because you're not achieving the standardized timing of when you're supposed to have done something. I recorded a conversation with Guava. I don't know if you've met him on the island yet. He's an artist who I'll connect you to, because you two would have a lot in common. He's awesome. And he has this real thing about, you know, not the same as me, not all 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds and into infinity should all necessarily have to achieve the same things at the same time, because they're not made that way. And unless you can do differentiated learning and understanding, but just because I couldn't do that doesn't mean to say that I should get thrown on the scrap heap or put down as that child that will never do X, Y, Z.
That's true. That's true. You definitely do have to allow each person develop into their self in their own time. And we can't expect every student to be the same. We can't expect every child to approach learning in the same way. We have to be willing to see what resonates with them, and then figure out in a plan that will help them to understand the material and then be able to apply it beyond the exams.
Absolutely. So that kind of brings me to where you are now. So how do you work with your students there?
Well, my work is part administration, and then there's also this teaching component of my work. I'm in charge of the peer mentoring program, as well as the men's cave mentoring program, and then there's the Capoeira student club as well. And those are my support units for students, to really give them the tools, in addition to helping support them through the academic resources, but really giving them the social tools that they need in order to eventually become a medical doctor, in order to build the community while they're here on the university. And then the teaching aspect of my work is that I work with a lot of students who are not doing well, who have failed an entire semester of classes. And I have to come in and try and get them to rethink their approach to learning. And that's where the learning strategies come in terms of helping them think differently about the importance of teaching content to their peers, the importance of doing multiple choice questions, the importance of creating a schedule that supports their learning and their well-being. And so there's those two aspects of my work, where I'm teaching in the virtual classroom now, and then also advising students on a one-on-one basis, and then also facilitating these programs that I offer.
Which bits feed you the most? Which bits make you thrive?
The work I do around mentoring definitely resonates with me more. The work I do around yes and no. So when I'm in that space and I'm interacting with students, and I can tell that the energy is right, and they're really understanding, and they're really vibing, and we're having a great conversation, and they're taking the information and being able to apply it, then I feel that work is really valuable. And I definitely do appreciate it. But there's the other aspect of my work where I enjoy writing, and I enjoy being alone in my head, and just zoning out in that space as well.
It's interesting though, because when you have the awareness that you have to do the self-reflection on yourself, that gives us a great understanding of the people that we're then coming to work with, because they all have these different nuances. We all have different things that work for us, and it's how we unlock that, isn't it?
It is definitely figuring out ways to connect with people to help them release their potential. And that is a process in itself. But I realize that through the writing, through the content that I put out there, that I have to embody the things I write and that I talk about. And so it's the writing and the reflecting is really critical to my ability to be able to teach and be able to mentor, because I know that, okay, what I do alone has to also show up in that public space.
Yeah, it's again, I think this awareness and self-reflection of then not being a double standard of saying, well, this is how I want you to do it and this is how you should do it. Don't you be looking at me over here doing what I'm doing. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And let's be honest, we know, well, I know certainly growing up in a different era where it was like, okay, it really is the case of telling me what you want me to do and you showing me something else altogether. So, you know, but if we put ourselves out there in the public space, then we have to be mindful, I guess, I would say, of holding ourselves to our own accountability that we would extend to others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I'm telling the students they have to get up in the morning and exercise before they do their work, I have to do it as well.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. I definitely do feel that a sense of ownership. If I'm going to tell you about it, if I'm going to teach you about it, if I'm going to write about it, I have to embody that in my behavior as well.
That's awesome.
It's easier said than done, but I have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, you know, it's hard to just, I think last Saturday or Sunday, I kind of had this loose idea. I'm going to go up Boggy Peak one more time before I leave the island. And then, you know, the days are busy. You're doing all the things that you're doing. And I wake up and I think, oh, gosh, yeah. Can I? Yeah. Okay, fine. And then to make it interesting, so when I go up Boggy Peak, so for people listening, it's the highest point on the island. I don't go from the easiest route, which is Christian Valley. I go from the pineapple field and the road, and it's harder, but it's in my hood, so I can walk to it. So I sort of got down to the approach where I normally go and see some friends of mine, and I thought, oh, there's this other path I've been looking at, and it kind of took me up the side of the mountain, and I'm like, all of a sudden I'm in the middle of somewhere new, seeing some farmer in the middle of nowhere on the side of the cliff, and then it brings me out on the road, and I get up Boggy Peak, and I can sit there and say, I'm just doing exactly what I'm telling other people to do. And there's so much to be said for that. And it is exactly that thing. I'm not going to suggest you do anything that I'm not willing to do myself on repeat.
It is for sure. And I've had that happened multiple times where I had to really check myself and say, all right, Vernon, if you're telling other people to do this, you have to do it as well. Just recently, I started writing another book, and I'm finding that I have to get up really early in order to do it. And I'm already an early riser, but I've told myself I have to get up at precisely 4 a.m. to put in this work and then do the exercise and do everything else that I want to do. And it's difficult because I have my own routine where I like to journal and I do other things in order to get my day off to a good start. But now putting that on my agenda as well, it's like, okay, this is tough, but make my schedule tight, but this is what I require of my students, so I have to do it.
So it's your structure and your strategy that's working for you, so you want to replicate that out in every way. Right.
I mean, I know that the things I teach the students, I know that it works. And so now it's just, okay, all right, I just have to do it. And I've done it before, and it's a matter of me getting back into that space of doing it. So I don't teach students anything that I don't know, that I haven't experienced personally, but there's definitely been times where I've moved from that phase where I don't need to do it in that same capacity. And I'm realizing that in order to really teach and to really connect, I have to continue to do some of those things that helped me get to this point so that I can relate better and speak to that experience.
It's being able to self-evaluate your own growth, isn't it? So that you can say, oh yeah, well, this thing, actually, I really need this. And there's this other thing, well, I think now I can probably let go of that. Yet ultimately probably gets replaced by something else anyway, because exactly as you said, I mean, literally in the ironic way, every day is a school day, right? So it's all about learning and experiencing day in, day out, really, and being open to knowing I know quite a bit, but actually I know nothing, which is something I often say to myself. Oh yeah, I know quite a lot. Nah, I know nothing, because then I'll listen to somebody else and go, oh no, you know not a thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I think, I mean, and that's something I see very much in the way that you come over. There's this really nice humbleness. So you're not going, oh yeah, I'm a professor, don't you know? Do you know what I mean? There isn't any of that about you, because that wouldn't sit with you, I guess.
No, and that approach to life, to learning is really critical. If you want to see growth, you cannot act like you know everything, that you've seen everything, because then there's nothing for you to experience, no space for you to grow into who you possibly can be. So you have to remain humble. You have to have that childlike mind in order to really grow and to go anywhere in life, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just looking, we've been talking for nearly an hour already, and I know that means that we have to do some more conversations in the future. So I'm sort of thinking of how we could kind of round this session off. And what I'm actually thinking, and I'm going to share it with you, is maybe you could give 3 or 5 tips on how people can make some changes, some strategies around something that they know isn't working for them, and how they can make those changes. And then we could kind of end with some berimbau, which is beautiful and cathartic, and you could just share a bit of that. How does that sound?
That sounds great. I can do that. Yeah.
Cool. So 3 or 5 tips around whatever you choose, and talk as much as you want, as long as you want, or as little as you want.
Okay, let me give you 3 tips. The first thing that I would say, if you're really trying to create some change, you're really trying to move some things around in your life, one of the first things, the best things you can do is to get some time alone, some quiet time. And I know that's hard right now with the pandemic, but if you stay up a little bit later one night, or you get up a little bit earlier, then you can find some time to really think and to reflect on where you are and what you want to change. I mean, self-awareness, that is the critical first step. And the best way for you to do that is to get some time alone and really figure out, okay, what do I want to change? And then the second piece to that is, once you identify how you want to change, is commit to that process. So then you have to create the structures in order to support it. So that may mean that you need to create a schedule. If schedules don't work for you, you feel too restrictive, then all right, let's think about what can you do in order to support that. For example, let's say that you want to start playing an instrument. One of the things that many folks will say, in terms of the experts around building a habit, is you have to build in that structural support. So if there's an instrument that you want to play, it needs to be in a space where you're going to see it frequently, so you're more likely to pick it up. Yep. So put that instrument in your environment, in your kitchen or your bedroom, wherever. So eventually one day you decide, all right, I'm going to pick it up. And then you get into that routine of picking it up. And then the last thing is, find someone to hold you accountable. It's really important that we have like self-accountability. That's critical. But if you can connect with another person around the change you want to see that you developed from the silence, then you can do a whole lot more than what you really think is possible. So those are my 3. Get alone, get clear on what you want, create the change by giving yourself some structure, and then connecting with another person for accountability to help you see those changes come alive.
That's awesome. And 3 really tangible, easy things to do, actually.
I think so. I think it's definitely possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the procrastinators out there, don't think about it. Just get into it, right? Don't give yourself a reason not to. Just embrace it.
Yeah, and you'll find that once you get started, you can do a lot more. I mean, you say, I'm going to commit to working out for 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes the first day. The next day you can do 7, and then it builds on it. But it's just a matter of getting into the habit.
Yeah, and it's the smallest change, right? And the ripple effects that can have when you do the self-reflection in your alone time and say, oh gosh, yeah, I noticed that I feel better because I did that little thing. So that's really cool. It's been great talking to you. And as I say, we could just carry on, but maybe you could just give us, I don't know, a couple of minutes of that amazing sound of that berimbau, because for some reason it has a real, well, I'm not saying for some reason, I know the reason. For me, it's almost like trance-like, meditative, that takes me into that space.
Yeah.
For people that haven't heard it, it's a real treat for them, right?
I think it's a real treat, but some people don't like it.
We're not talking to those people. So I'm just going to sit here and enjoy it, and then when you've done, we can do that official. Okay, thank you ever so much. I'm just going to get ready to sit back and enjoy it.
Okay, I'll play for a couple of minutes here.
That would be awesome. There really is something that gives me this complete kinesthetic kind of buzz down here, and then this really nice, and I'm just like, like that. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time out to speak this morning. And I'm definitely going to ask you back for another conversation, and maybe we'll pick something really specific if you're happy to do that, because it's been awesome having you.
Absolutely happy to do that.
If you want to share with people verbally how they can find you, follow you, you can do that now. Otherwise, everything is going to be put in the links below, but share away.
Yeah, so my website is vlindsayphd.com. Once you get to the website, you can find all the Instagram, Facebook, all the social media handles. So yeah, let's reach out. Let's connect.
Cool. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.